Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
Welcome to the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, bringing you practical, timely, and accurate insight so that you can more effectively lead your organization.
What are you learning as you're working with our employers in and around engagement and workplaces, from work at home, working in the office, or hybrid?
Yeah, Phil, I think you're absolutely correct. I heard a statistic the other day. We're still studying this to really understand and survey organizations, but the best we can guess, there's at least 50% of the workforce right now that is working from home at least one day a week. And when we look at what employers are saying about their job opportunities, they see this as a non-negotiable. If there's not some sort of flexibility and work from home, they're not even considering that role. And so that really puts employers in a situation that I think we have to start looking critically at the system we have in place to say, how does this impact employee engagement? And what we're learning is that it is having an impact. In fact, when we look at the national index on the employee engagement scores, both internally that we reference here in AIM and then externally with organizations like Gartner and those sorts of organizations, on the whole, we're seeing employee engagement actually slide back. We're losing some ground on that. And I think this is important to note, that this distributed and hybrid workforce is absolutely having an impact. Employees want it, but employers haven't quite figured out how to manage it yet.
Yeah, and you know what's difficult for me with that is I like to use data and information to make good business decisions. But in the absence of data and information, I can use kind of my gut, my feel, my experience. And the way I would do that when I didn't do an employee and opinion engagement survey would be to walk around. Well, now I can walk around and talk to myself because no one there to observe and talk to and engage with. And it's really hard to get a feel, and everybody is someplace else.
What the data is starting to show us, both in the surveys that I've been working with and the focus groups I've been conducting, is that employees are missing that recognition. And when I have dug deeper and I've looked at this over lots of companies, it's not so much, they really appreciate the thank you gifts, the care packages that I know a lot of HR groups are still doing. But what they're craving and what they're saying is really preventing a full engagement is that recognition. Look, employees feel like they've been going the extra mile for a while now. And more than anything, they just want somebody to be able to drop a note in their inbox, mail them a card that says, hey, I noticed you went the extra mile, and I want to tell you how that impacted our team and how grateful we are for that. And Phil, this blew me away. Of all the things we asked about, salary, benefits, any of it, what comes back time and time again, it's just that recognition piece to say, hey, I want people to see that I'm here, I'm putting in the effort, and I'm a team player.
I knew who stayed late. I knew who came in early. I knew who came in early and stayed late, right? And when it came time for merit increases, I could consider those factors as well as their productivity and so on. And now that's a whole different game to try and make that decision now. So I can see where someone might say they're quietly quitting, which is really an outcome of no one's recognizing the impact I'm making.
As our frontline managers, we've got to equip them to do the same thing when our workforce isn't right there physically with us. But also, in addition to that, I think the other thing that we're really seeing is people want their job duties quantified in a way that we haven't seen before. And so there's a couple things happening with the younger generations, and especially in this distributed workforce, is they want to know exactly what the requirements of their position are, and they also want to know the direct path to a promotion. What we're seeing more than ever is the younger workforce wants to be able to show their accomplishments on LinkedIn. They want to be able to say, hey, I've been here and I've been putting in those early mornings and late nights. And I'll actually do that as long as I can tell somebody about it, which really isn't a surprise in the generation and the time that we're in.
What is the number one issue that creates legal problem for you with performance reviews?
Well, for me, it's grade inflation. Let's say you have a system of evaluating employees from 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And the temptation is for people who are doing the reviews to give everybody 4s and 5s. And that is not what performance reviews are designed to do. The employee who shows up every day and does their job, that is meeting your expectations. When you hire somebody, you don't hire them with the expectation that they're not going to show up every day and that they're not going to do their job every day. If they do those things, that is a meets expectations. And on my scale, that is a number 3. The
Now,
people who don't show up every day and who don't do their jobs, those are the 1s and 2s. The people who do show up every day and do their jobs but go above and beyond, those are the 4s and 5s. The problem is when you are taking those 3s and you're giving them the 4s and 5s, what are you going to do with the 4s and 5s? Well, they're all of a sudden definitely 4s and 5s along with the 3s. The 2s might be 3s. And all of a sudden, your whole scale is messed up. And when you have to make employment-related decisions, you're looking at those performance reviews, you're making those decisions, and then when an employee doesn't like one of those decisions, turns around and sues the organization, and you claim that they're a terrible employee, guess what those performance reviews show? Oh, well, they're a 3 or a 4.
3 or 4. Now, the challenge I've always had with that over the years is, and this is why I recommend management, leadership, development, and training, is really defining that 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, however you're going to create your rating, a 4-star, 5-star, whatever the system is. Because the question is, are you comparing the talent compared to everyone else, right? So is it I rated a 4 for showing up every day because no one else shows up every day, so therefore you're a 4? Or is it you show up every day is defined in our criteria as a 3? And what I have found is it's a better place to have a defined set of this is what a 3, 4, and 5 is, and have everyone compared to that versus comparing each other in the workplace to each other.
When you talk about psychological safety, it's about fostering diversity. It's about fostering different ideas and making sure that there is an open, inclusive environment. It's making sure that employees feel valued, that they feel like they can speak up. And in the end, it's going to make for a more diverse, a more inclusive environment, but it's also going to make sure that everyone is heard. And it'll likely, in the end, make sure that mistakes are caught because somebody feels like they can speak up and say, hey, this isn't the right direction to go.
It's really hard to hold people accountable if we haven't spelled out expectations. And that's why I love a team charter, because in a team charter, we're going to talk about ground rules of our group. And when we're together in a meeting, what we want to do is we want to come back to that value system. And we want to talk about how we're misaligned to the values that we've all agreed to in this culture and in this workplace. And so when that's happening in that exact situation where people are talking over one another, that's where the leader is to step in and say, I'm going to take a pause here. One of the things that we agreed to in the group is we were going to have respectful dialogue. And when we talked about conflict, we were going to handle that in a way that everyone was heard. That's number 8 on our ground rules. So I think as managers and as leaders, we want to have this dialogue. We want to have competing ideas because we know diverse ideas is what gets us to the best solution. But it takes a special skill set in our managers to be able to facilitate those conversations in a way that everyone feels respected when they leave the room.
Resource officers in school was kind of a new thing when I was there. Now many schools have resource officers, and the concept that we're going to protect you at school and protect your views and the things we can and can't say. And then you get into a workplace and we're all expected to be adults. And we don't have resource officers. We have human resource professionals, and we have supervisors and managers who are, looking after our well-being, but without training, right? The expectation is going to be a misdirection, right? Because it's a new place, it's a new forum, and I'm dealing with different generations who haven't had this mental preparation for the sensitivity around mental health and so on.
The First Amendment and being able to say whatever you want, it is not an open door policy to be able to say whatever you want. It is not being able to use psychological safety as a crutch or an excuse for poor performance. If someone is truly performing badly, it doesn't mean that you can't go to them and critique them and create and make sure that negative behavior is being corrected. That is not what this is all about. This is about fostering positivity, but not allowing employees to do and say whatever they want whenever they want. And I think that that's really important for employers to hear, because a lot of times when you hear terms like psychological safety, people think, oh my God, now anybody can do whatever they want and get away with it. And that is absolutely not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, that would have the opposite effect, right? Like if we allowed people to just come in and say whatever they wanted to say, that may allow one person's voice, but how many other voices are being silenced? And so that's what's really key, that we have to maintain a culture that is a culture of respect.
To be quite honest, Phil, it's not the sexiest portion of the OSHA workplace, of the OSHA standard. It's really administrative. And it can be overlooked. There are very specific regulations that deal with this. The OSHA inspector will, like I said, these are the first things that they ask for. And, many employers aren't aware of this, but there is a standard that says if you get asked for your OSHA 300 logs, your 300A, your 300, you have 4 hours from the moment that you get requested to turn those over.
Yeah.
That's not a lot, but fortunately, that's where knowing your rights, knowing your the way the system works, and also knowing people like Bert and myself, you can negotiate that with the compliance officer. Very rarely do I see an employee get cited for not turning over those records, but that just goes to show that there's standards in that act and standards in the regulations that really are time sensitive, that employers should definitely be aware of.
I don't know what our government's trying to create, or we should say the Fed is trying to create from an unemployment rate, but I know they're making every effort they can to increase inflationary results so that we will have unemployment. But let's keep in mind that, today there's almost 11 million job openings and there's, 5 million people unemployed. So for us to reverse that, we almost have to, we have to create, 15 million unemployed, or 15 million, less jobs, so that we can employ the 5 million and then have some competition that balances out the wages. Right. Depends how you look at that, but I just don't see us having a recession as it relates to wages. I see that continuing for quite some time. I know you're predicting into the second quarter next year, but my concern is employers are thinking, I don't have to budget 5, 6, maybe 8% for next year because we're going to have a recession and therefore I won't be hiring. Well, you'll still be hiring because we're still going to be recruiting people away from your business, and you're going to have to go out and find replacement workers. And that's if you're anticipating zero growth. So I think the concept that I'm hearing people talk about, I think it's a flawed concept when I look at the raw numbers that suggest we're going to have a war on talent for quite some time. And I'm talking about years to come, not just through the second quarter.
Correct.
Even if we go into recessionary period for a small period of time, the moment we come out of that, we're going to be right back where we're at.
Yep. And keep in mind that the numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics is total compensation increase. So it's not just base pay. So even though there are many surveys that came out this fall that said, 3-4% on the base pay adjustments, many employers and many members of AIM and our clients are providing two increases, one on the base pay, which is that normal 3 to 4%, but then they're providing a separate variable piece, a discretionary 3 or 4% to make up the difference. And that's what the Bureau of Labor Statistics counts. So when we talk about 5.6 or maybe next year, even 6 or 7%, it's a combination of all the adjustments that are made, not just the base pay adjustment by itself.
There's two key things to personal leadership. is you got to be resourceful and you got to be able to make a decision. And when I was young, I was neither of those, but that played out that day. I mean, one of the things I tell people, it's not about the resources that you don't have. It's about how resourceful you are with what you do have. And that day on the plane, we didn't have any resources except your mind. So it all starts with your mindset. And that's what Bill really focused on. So that's probably the one thing I always go back to. I mean, there's many lessons in my book I talk about, but it's about resourcefulness and decision-making. One of the things about leadership, Phil and Bert, that was really evident is if you go to look at that picture right there, there's no crew on the right side of the plane. The right side of the plane was managed strictly by passengers that had zero training. And that's how you know how leaders step up in times of crisis. Because the thing about leadership is you don't have to know all of it, but you have to be able to lead people. You have to be able to build rapport quickly and lead people. And that's what leadership's about. It's not about knowing every detail. And that's what that right side of the plane really dictated and showed that day is people stepped up when they had no training whatsoever for a plane crash.
Let's talk about holiday parties and drinking or the use of recreational weed at work, whatever might be the case. Give us the lowdown on the do's and don'ts.
Well, I'm going to boil it down to something fairly simple. And we always encourage our attorneys, especially our younger attorneys, not to engage in what we call career limiting behavior.
Right.
And I think if you sort of adhere to that rule, avoid engaging in career limiting behavior, what it does, it kind of makes a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek remark to people, but it puts the responsibility on them to behave responsibly at a party because, you know what, those things have consequences if you misbehave. And you want people to enjoy themselves at these parties, but you also want them to enjoy themselves responsibly. And I think that that's sort of the key point there is that while people can have a good time, you don't want it to get out of hand. And so if you are an employer and you choose to serve alcoholic beverages at a holiday party, more power to you, but just make sure things don't get out of hand. You may want to have some people, members of management in particular, avoid consuming the alcoholic beverages at these events so that they are responsible and can sort of disrupt any other inappropriate behavior that they may be witness to. I've said before many times on the program and in all of the trainings that I do, like it or not, you are a manager and a supervisor 24/7. And if you are with your subordinate employees, you as the manager have a responsibility to sort of keep an eye on things, a spotter, if you will, a holiday party spotter. And what you can do is if you are avoiding the alcohol or you are consuming, but it is very, very, very limited and moderate, you're in a position to tamp down any inappropriate behavior that may occur at one of the holiday parties.
To all of our members that were with us last night, and for the many that said they couldn't join us, please come back next year and we'll see you then. And it was a great time.
Phil, I appreciate you saying that you followed the recommendations that I've been making on the program about good behavior at parties. But, you know, we did manage to find an example of inappropriate behavior at the party last night. And I think Nick's got an image to share with everybody. And,
I've got to tell you, I'm not even prepared what that is, but I may have to take my glasses off to see it. All right, let's see what we got.
There's an image from the party last night. You could see somebody there hugging somebody else at the party last night, bare-chested with kisses all over his face and everything. And you know, again, despite my best recommendations on avoiding offensive behavior at a holiday party, Phil, I could see you're turning red here that others may not be able to see. But yeah, so again, for all you folks out there who listened to the program the last couple of weeks about appropriate holiday party behavior, don't necessarily follow Phil's guidance there, but follow my recommendations.
Oh, no, that is good. There's a story behind that, and I will tell you that has been highly doctored up. That is for sure. The only thing that might be true on that is the chest hair. I'm not sure. Are we close at all to any kind of impairment testing to determine marijuana impairment like we have for a blood alcohol content test?
So when Colorado legalized weed in 2014, they did put a nanogram level, kind of like we do with alcohol, in a per se level. For alcohol, it's 0.08. What we found with marijuana is very unique in that, especially with the passing of Amendment 3 recently, they did not put specifically a nanogram level in there because every person can have a different tolerance to that marijuana. And they did a study which was fascinating, just different types of blood levels. They used a subject who was smoking weed consistently for 10 minutes, and they used a subject who didn't smoke but one hit off of a marijuana pipe or whatever it was, and they found that no matter what it was, whether it was a consistent smoking or a infrequent smoking, that the nanogram levels dropped immediately after 2 hours to below that per se level for Colorado. So what they had to do was obtain a blood sample within 2 hours of the last time that they smoked, where they were never going to have a nanogram level, even if they were really highly impaired, that they were never going to have a nanogram level at that per se limit.
There is something just inherently reliable about good contemporaneously prepared documentation. That's documentation that's prepared at the time of the incident. And the reason why it's inherently reliable to judges and juries is because that documentation is prepared at a time that the employer, neither the employee nor the employer, are contemplating litigation. So it's deemed to just be a little bit more trustworthy than testimony at the time the dispute is actually being litigated in front of a judge or a jury.
Bert, any reason for any of that to come through the request of an attorney?
You can't use the documentation in court as both a sword and a shield. So what I mean by that is that you can't assert attorney-client privilege. You can't, first of all, claim you did an investigation and use the fact that you did an investigation to protect the company, to use it as a shield, or actually really to almost use it as a sword at that point, and then say, well, we're not going to share the results of the investigation with you. We're not going to share what we learned because that's protected by attorney-client privilege. So what I'm getting at there is that you as an HR professional may involve an attorney sort of behind the scenes to help structure the investigation, even review documentation. But ultimately, at the end of the investigation itself, you want it to be public because that's going to be your defense down the road. Not just the fact you investigated, but everything that you learned during the investigation and how that supports your decision. So while there may be certain aspects of the investigation behind the scenes that are attorney-client privilege, the results of the investigation itself, any witness interviews, anything like that, that's all going to be fair game for disclosure down the road.
So sometimes, Bert, when I think of this, I know we're up against a time. So there's documentation and investigation, and sometimes you're documenting events, but it's in form of an investigation. Just how deep of an investigation are you going to have? And one common problem, believe it or not, that I do see is people will investigate and document everything other than maybe the person they're having the issue with. They talk to everybody else and document everything everyone else says, make a decision without talking to the individual, maybe that allegedly had done something or is complaining about something, or they didn't sit and give that person an opportunity to explain themselves.
A rule of thumb I suggest to all my clients is that if you are a supervisory employee, a managerial level employee, do not be friends with your subordinate employees on social media. It is not
that's
worth
funny
it.
that you've said that, because I iterate to my staff frequently. I just recommend we're not friends on social media, nothing good can happen. Now it's up to them. They choose to do it, but I encourage that on a regular basis.
And it's one thing for coworkers to be friends, quote unquote friends on social media, but it's a whole nother thing when it's a superior subordinate relationship. You again, is a manager. You are an agent of the company, and what you know from social media about your subordinate employees, that means the employer itself knows that information. The one thing I do want to leave everyone with is, again, under the National Labor Relations Act, and in particular under the current administration, they definitely are going to be very strict on employers regulating employees' social media activity. And so that, again, you as the employer, you have a right to prohibit employees from posting on social media while they're in employee uniform, making it clear that if they do post about the company, which they have a right to do, that they must be truthful about what they're posting. So you do have the right as the employer to restrict employees' social media activity, but that needs to be done very, very carefully. It is a really good time to remind everybody that minimum wages in the states across the country may be adjusted. There are probably about, 20, 25 states that look like they're having minimum wage adjustments. Ogletree, again, is a service to its clients and to other guests. You can go to our website, and there are some interactive maps available on our website. One of those is a minimum wage chart that Nick has put up on the screen for everyone to see. And it's really nice because you can click on your state and it'll tell you what the minimum wage is and the effective date. And so states from Washington, California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Arizona, Maine, Colorado, Maryland, Vermont, Illinois for our listeners, Rhode Island, Florida, Hawaii, Missouri, New Mexico, Virginia, Delaware, Alaska, Minnesota, Nebraska, Nevada, Michigan, Ohio, and Montana are all seeing minimum wage increases in the new year. Another piece of news I wanted to talk about is everybody will recall that on December 13, 2022, our president signed what's known as the Respect for Marriage Act. He signed that into law, which guarantees marriage equality for same-sex and interracial couples under federal law. The Respect for Marriage Act requires that states recognize marriages between two individuals so long as the marriage was legal in the state where it was performed. Just keep in mind that from the perspective of benefits and those types of things, same-sex marriages in benefits do need to be provided to same-sex couples in your state, just the same as they would be applied to non-same-sex couples in a marriage, and again, in most of these states. So just keep that in mind. Next, I want to talk about is and Jim may touch base on this, there's a new spending bill that's been pushed through Congress, and it's, I think, a $2.4 or $2.7 trillion spending bill. Jim, you'll correct me if I'm wrong on that number. But for our purposes today, I want to point out that 13.8 billion of that is devoted to the United States Department of Labor for fiscal year 2023, and 299 million for the National Labor Relations Board. So just keep in mind that those agencies are likely to remain very well funded into through 2023, which means for employers that their agents are going to be actively out there looking to hold employers accountable and knocking on your doorsteps and banging down, or knocking on the doors and standing on your doorsteps, I should say, in order to look for violations in the labor area and under the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Obviously, the House with Republican control means very little chance of major labor and employment legislation passing. I think that's good news for employers, right? So we won't have to deal with things like the PRO Act, the Paycheck Fairness Act, increases in the minimum wage.
Well,
we also
hold on though. We still will need to contend with the Democrat majority, maybe even 3-1 at the NLRB, for a period of time that's going to try to push through as much of the PRO Act as they can through the administrative agency instead of through Congress.
But they will be able to throw sand in the gears of the regulatory apparatus and try to slow down what they're doing at the Department of Labor for, say, like the independent contractor regulation, or what they're doing at the National Labor Relations Board, with card check and everything else. So it'll be an interesting 2 years. And I've been telling people, if you like political theater, get your popcorn ready.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/thisweekatwork, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment, like LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're everywhere you are. And you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.